So, Martin, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, early in the morning.
Yeah. You're just about to leave to work, so we'll try to be quick.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So, I just heard you saying that Limfrist broke up.
Yes.
What's the reason for that?
Members were going to start doing other things like going to school and continuing their education and things, the drummer in particular. So after the summer, he wasn't going to be able to do anything. So, and in the summer, the guitarist couldn't do anything because of work. So it really made things complicated because we live in all different parts of the country.
Yeah.
So 2 members live in New York, I'm in California, and another member's in Philadelphia. So we're really on opposite ends of the country. So it gets really hard to coordinate any type of gigs or anything. So we just said, okay, we've been around for maybe 4 years. We'll that's the about the average life of a punk band, and it was time to stop, so we did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Besides of Limfrist, could you tell something you've been doing during the years? You've been really active in the punk scene.
Yeah, I did another band that I played drums in Los Angeles with some friends. It was called Tragatelo, and we have a 12-inch that's going to come out really soon. And what else have I done over the years? I keep on doing the label in Guatemala and releasing records, and I'm not as active in the LA area as I've been in Chicago, where I'm originally from. Yeah. Only because I don't know the city that well and I don't know everybody around, but I'm going to probably try to make a little bit of a change with that because I'm going to start another band locally, which will allow me to be a little more active locally. So, yeah.
I guess most of the people know you from Los Crudos, mm-hmm. So tell something about that, like some of the short history and why it broke up, because it was like really well known all around.
Mm-hmm. I think, because we were around a long time. We were probably around 8 years with Los Crudos, and it got to the point that it was a pretty popular band, and we found ourselves touring so much and playing so much that it almost became routine. Yeah. And I don't like when things start becoming such a routine. And I think a lot of the passion starts to drain out of something when you just beat it down like that. So we weren't finding enough time to just sit at home and to I started finding that every summer we were gone, which is a very hot time for us to do things locally, and we were going away, and I wasn't comfortable with that. I didn't like that. So I think, we had a nice long life, and it was time to just stop and do other projects. So, yeah.
What are the best memories of the Los Crudos years? You went to crazy places.
There's a lot of really good memories in Los Crudos. So there's so many. Going to South America was very good. I thought that was a very important thing for us to do. Our tours in Mexico were always crazy. I think you saw the video, and that opening scene, that's in Mexico City. And that was just, you get the hair stand up, So, so it was, there was a lot of amazing people we met over the years. And I think as a band, we did a lot of really good stuff, especially on a local level and just abroad. So it was really cool. Yeah.
Like when you compare the places where you've been touring, like Southern America and US and Europe, like can you tell the biggest differences in those places?
Yeah, it just depends on I think the cities you go to and the specific countries, and you see the differences. I think during the 90s when we were in the States, it was a very big emo time, that was very popular, where people were very little dancing at shows. Everybody was just, very just standing around and observing. And then when we went over to, Mexico, it was like chaos. It was like time warping back to the 80s, where it was just these enormous pits of people and people getting crazy and really, really showing that they're into it, which, excuse me, we came back and we're just like, the U.S. is so tame in comparison, you know? So that was that particular time. And I think the U.S. has turned around a little bit and people are dancing once again at shows and, you know, but not in this totally crazy way, but being like just into it, you know, and showing that energy, which I like the energy. I think it's good. You know, Japan was a whole different thing, and Europe, you know, east to west was very different. So there were certain cities that really stuck out to me that I thought were really, you know, Poland was very cool, very different. I don't know, some of the Eastern countries were really neat. I mean, I liked a lot of stuff, you know, about different places. You know, they all gave something really neat. So yeah.
Right now we are at your home in LA.
Santa Ana. Santa Ana, California. Yeah. It's 45 minutes south of Los Angeles. We're close to Mexico, about an hour away, hour and a half from Mexico. So. I thought you still lived in Chicago, and I was surprised to hear that you live here. So what brought you down here in sunny California? My partner. So I met him when I was working on my video documentary. So we became really close friends and just, you know, close. And I wanted to change from Chicago. I think when I got to a point where I knew something too well that I wanted to come away from it a little bit. So I moved here, and it's very different. Very different, But it's very suburban as opposed to urban, which Chicago's very urban and very different, but I've been adjusting. It's good. I've been here 2.5 years now. So, you know, it's not too far from LA. So if I need a little more action, I go to LA. Do you think the climate affects on the people? Like Chicago must be really different than you have here. So do you think it affects on the mentality of the people or how they act? I think the overall, you know, people in California tend to be a lot more relaxed. You know, Chicago is very intense weather. You get extreme heat and extreme cold. So people are kind of extreme. So we have a whole different way of just talking and interacting with people. So you see the differences. You do, you know. I have this, you know, my friends would make fun of me when I moved here. They said, you have this crazy walk. You look like you're walking and you're going to beat somebody up, but that's the way you walk. And I don't know, you know, I don't notice that, but they notice it, you know. And I guess there's this, you know, there's little differences that people do notice, you know. But the climate, I mean, it's so nice here, you know. People become just, there's not really seasonal changes. So it's sunny a lot, you know, and it's very, you know, it's warm right now, and, you know, it just snowed again in Chicago. So it's different, you know. You get a little subdued, I guess, because of the weather. You just get a little calmer. Let's talk about Limfrist a bit. It was like openly gay straight edge band. So did you guys get a lot of shit for being gay? Because not all of the people are very tolerant for that. I think, you know, in the majority of the audience that we had, I think were okay with it. They were fine with it. Nobody was ever out in the open opposed to what we did. You know. It would be hard to, I think. When you have 4 people that are really out in the open, what are you going to say to us to offend us, you know? So it didn't happen, and so that was the bulk of our audience, and then we would get interest from, you know, maybe a queer or gay publication. So, you know, they were just going, why punk, you know? That's what they were thinking, but no problems, no, nothing really major, no.
So you see it more of a positive thing that you took like this open stance for that?
I think it's positive, yeah. We got just a couple, we would hear or get letters or see something on the internet that was negative, so it was cyber anger. And, you do what you want with that. So we were going to do what we wanted to do, and we did. So, that's what, if somebody was bothered and, it was always, I heard that this or that was, somebody was bothered by it, but that's what punk is for me. It's like not about, I'm not going to keep secrets, hardcore is about being out up front and not being secretive or hiding. And that's hardcore, so that's what we do. So.
Well, I'm sure you've been thinking a lot, like why people hate gays so much. There's a lot of people who can't understand that at all. So what do you think is the reason for that?
I don't know. As far as the culture that evolves around gay, do you think? Or is it, you mean just the sexuality?
Sexuality, I guess.
I don't know if it's biblical or where it comes from. I think in a lot of cases it is a biblical thing or it's a religious thing. And, when it comes down to that, I think those are issues that people need to work out. It's not really a problem with me. It's so, just because somebody is gay or, practice same-sex, intercourse or just, sex, it doesn't mean that you have to, if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. But I just don't understand why people get angry about it. That's always confused me, so I don't know, I don't know. I'm not angry for, I'm very comfortable. So it's,
Well, I guess it's pretty much the same that racial hatred, like a fear of something unknown and new. Right,
or fear of something that they've thought about and it disturbs them that they think about it because they have something that just, they maybe it's their discomfort with the fact that they even think about it. I mean, when you hate something like that, and it's a good analogy to compare it with race, it's like, why are you so bothered by a foreigner or by, something different, So it's something that it's that we live in cultures of fear where people fear the different and we have a tendency in society in general to kind of dehumanize people. So if it's not based on race, it could be sexuality or something like that. And I think, it's really unfortunate, because you just miss out on so much and, you can learn so much from many different people and they can learn from you, and I think, that's really important to, I mean, we're living in such crazy times right now and the last thing we need is more of this demonizing of people, so, yeah.
You're also doing a record label.
Yes.
Tell me something about that. The releases are really hard to find, at least over in Europe.
Lingua Armada Records. I've been doing it since the early 90s. Yeah. We really I started, releasing records in the late 80s and under a different name, and then Lingua Armada happened when Los Crudos happened. And it was, more than anything, the idea was that I honestly thought that nobody was going to be interested in us. So my whole idea from the beginning was we will release our own records. Because I'm not going to go trying to convince somebody that we're good. I just said, I'm going to do this because I'm into what we're doing. Yeah. So it started from there, and it just started snowballing. So the first 7-inch we did under Lingua Armada, which was the first of Los Crudos 7-inch, we made 1,000 copies. And I had about 500 just sitting there for months. Yeah, nobody. I mean, we sold them in Chicago, okay, but then nothing happened until Maximum Rock and Roll reviewed it, and then it just started yeah, the snowballing started happening, and then it just kept on going. So kept on doing our records, and then Chicago bands records and other band stuff. You know, people that we knew that we were friends with, that we liked what they were doing, we started releasing their stuff. So yeah, and I'm still I don't know how much longer I'm gonna go, but I still have a couple more releases I want to do. So yeah, and I just can't get bored of this punk stuff. So I'm still into it. So.
Do you always do like a press of 1,000 copies and that's it?
No. See, it's Los Crudos stuff is a lot of records, a lot. I mean, and other labels helped out. I think the Ebullition record, there were 14 or 15,000.
Really?
Yeah, the Spitboy split. And then between all the pressings of the LP that Los Crudos did, with all the European pressing, everything, there were probably about 12,000 or something. So it's not, you know, some of the records, there will be maybe 1,500, 1,000 of the bands that maybe break up before the record comes out. And then some, you know, if there's more of a demand, there'll be 2,000 or something. It just depends on what. Yeah.
You also did this documentary video of Latin hardcore. Tell me the motivation behind it and something about the video.
I think the motivation behind the video was that I think when I started doing that project, I must have at some point thought this whole thing that we've been doing with all these different people, you know, all this Spanish hardcore punk was really fascinating to me, but I thought this is something that's really important and it's going to be lost, basically. And I thought there needs to be some sort of documentary, and I thought since I was so on the inside of it, I wanted to do it. And it was also part of my thesis for graduate school. So so basically I decided to do the video, you know, the documentary, and started interviewing people. I bought a video camera, started interviewing and getting footage of bands, and I got to do a lot of it when we did our last tour of the US. And you know, I just felt it was going to be something that maybe 10 years from now or 15 years from now people were going to be like, whoa, you know, what was this? And because if not, you know, it really, I also felt that even in the history of punk, there was a lot of, you know, Latinos and Chicanos who were involved in it, but that was almost an erased history. You didn't know that unless you were from LA or something, you know? So my idea was to really kind of look at the 90s in particular as a really important time, not just for that punk scene, but also just on a social level and on a political level, because so many things were happening in the whole U.S., anti-immigration laws were trying to pass anti-immigration laws, and it was really affecting all these communities. So the punks from these communities were responding to that, and there was a lot happening that had never been been happening before. So I really wanted to kind of focus in on that a little more. So you know, things like that I still think are really important is that, you know, bands were starting where members were here for several generations, and they were starting bands with people who recently migrated over, which, you know, a lot of people tend to separate the two, and they almost treat them like, or themselves sometimes, you know, those communities like two separate communities, and we were fusing. You know, based on histories and just kind of like coming from a similar place, and it was really interesting. So that was kind of important. So,
you've done lyrics for Los Crudos in Spanish, and for Limbris it was in English. So which is easier for you?
Easier for me, I'd have to say English, only because being here for so long in the United States, you know, I have a better handle on just real details of the language, and I know how to play with words, where in Spanish I don't know how to play as much with the words. And that's because I was raised in the States. I was born in South America, raised here, so not being around, you know, people from my country that much, you know, especially in, you know, because I'm from Uruguay. You have mostly Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of Puerto Ricans, a lot of Cubans. So everything that I got was from home.
Yeah.
So, you know, it gets tough. So when I try to express myself in details or very specifics, I do get lost. So in English, I can do that. So I can really play around with the language a little more.
Yeah.
So, and where with Spanish, I may have to do a little more research. And how do you, you know what I mean? So yeah, when I want to get the correct translation of something or an expression, I have to ask about it sometimes.
Yeah.
But that was a part of why Los Crudos did what we did. You know, as far as doing it all in Spanish, it was kind of a reclamation of saying, you know, this is what we originally were speaking, and you know, so.
But you still can manage with Spanish.
Oh, yeah, I'm bilingual, so it's like I can have conversations with people with no problem, you know. But it's I can find myself, you know, maybe getting stuck and going, what's that word, you know, once in a while, or you know, again, like a certain expression, or but I'm fully bilingual,
Well, I should let you go to work. So, thanks a lot for your time, and well, I don't know. I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, I hope people enjoy it.
There we go.
I hope you're not too bored. It's like, oh, there he goes talking again. Too many interviews.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.